All right. I think Sean's going to be late, so we'll kick off anyway. So welcome everyone to the second meeting of the real-time working group. We have a couple of items on the agenda. I don't know if you saw, but the MR to merge the working group page was merged, so we have a chance now to establish some exit criteria. I thought we could maybe do that at the end because there's a couple of things I thought we should discuss first. So I have the items, so I'll kick off. Yeah, so I opened an issue for the Kubernetes work with the delivery team. And I tried to break it down into tasks. There's one task missing to do with Helm, but I think if we were to get those tasks done, we would be at the stage where we have a Kubernetes deployment where the feature could be run in isolation aside from everything else. And it could be measured, right? So we'd have some kind of level of observability over it. Unfortunately, the delivery team is really busy. They're working on the Sidekick project export queue work, which they have completed, and that's on production, but they have some tidy up to do afterwards. So what I was going to suggest is that we deploy this on our existing application nodes and feature flag it to some really small projects with, or a small group and a small project with a small number of users. Could be like the plan project or something, but just something that won't put a lot of load on the system and would give us a chance to have like a known quantity of users and measure the number of connections, measure the resource usage. So what do you think?
Yes. I rewatched Sid and Christopher's video on iteration, and found it interesting that they basically said being blocked by another group or having another group as a dependency is a bad thing. So I would say whatever we have to do to move forward, let's do it. Even if we have to figure out how to do some of the Kubernetes stuff ourselves, I think that'd be cool. So we have less dependencies on other teams in the future. There is a couple demo projects that I've been using to demo to clients that we can use that have like a handful of people, no real traffic. So I'm down with that.
Yeah, so by saying we want to run it on the existing nodes, I'm thinking we still do it in the same way, right? Like a separate Puma server, same thing, so that we don't have to do extra work to support both setups where it's on a separate Puma server versus on the same Puma server, and it might consume more memory because same node but different Puma instance, different process, but at least it's closer to the final setup. It's just basically the one Puma server is going to be on a separate node instead of on the same node, right? So on that end, like the backend work won't change that much, I guess.
Do you know what we need to do to provision that?
I'm not sure. Like maybe Ben or Sean on the upside would know. Like,
sorry, I'm having a little trouble following the layout idea.
Yeah, so the
Kubernetes or what?
Yeah, the initial discussions we had was to run it on Kubernetes, right? And then it's because it's a bit blocked right now by the delivery team because they're working on the project export queue. So John was suggesting that how about we run it on our existing API and web nodes as like separate Puma process on the same nodes, but then just feature flag it to like a specific project so it's very limited and low risk. And yeah, so yeah, what do you think?
I'm not sure that's a good idea because the way we run Puma on the existing nodes is that we run it as part of Omnibus. So you'll have to do all of the Omnibus integration to run a separate Puma service. So if it's a fully separate Puma service, it will need to run. It'll basically you'll have to go through a full Omnibus integration before you can do any experiments.
Yeah, but we're planning to do that anyway, I think.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're gonna do Kubernetes anyway, it has to go to Omnibus still, right? Or is it different?
No,
Oh, okay.
at least not for GitLab.com.
I see.
Because
Although I know we'd still have to do the Omnibus stuff though if we really want to like deploy this right to the self-hosted customers and all that. But yeah.
yeah,
So you're saying going the Kubernetes route could have also been a shortcut because we didn't have to do the Omnibus stuff right away,
yeah,
right?
yeah. With the Kubernetes deployment, I'm trying to not block us on Omnibus, and I'm trying to not use Omnibus where possible. So if it's a completely new service, we should start it with the new pattern and not try and do the old pattern first. But this is just to run the WebSocket server and not I really think we might want to skip Puma as a WebSocket server, and go right to the Golang one. What was the Air?
Any cable?
Yeah, any cable Go. Simply because it would be a much better isolated way of dealing with the WebSocket connections.
Yeah, the problem with that is that the Go service or the binary or the the process that runs the WebSocket server doesn't have the Rails contacts, so it's not. So for it to work, we need a gRPC server, which kind of complicates the whole thing. So we still have to have this gRPC server that boots Rails, and then the Go.
But the gRPC stuff can happen in existing Puma. Like I believe we already have gRPC in the GitLab code base, so we don't have to
I'm not sure,
have a
but
separate
yeah,
process for that.
I think I'm not sure, but can you run the gRPC server as part of the Puma process or something?
I believe we already do, or at least I thought we already did.
I think we didn't. I think we use gRPC in a Gitly on Gitly, and like it's a separate service in itself.
Oh,
Not
right.
sure though.
So we're only using gRPC client.
Client, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought it should be possible if to add a gRPC listener to the existing Rails stack and just run it on it. If it has to run on a different port, it can run on a different port, but it should be able to. It should be possible to do in a. I don't know. I don't know enough about how that would integrate, but it should be possible to have a gRPC API available. But I haven't really looked at how to do gRPC with Rails.
Won't we eventually have to do the Omnibus work to meet the goal of shipping a feature for self-hosted customers?
Yeah, we do if that's the goal, but I guess our like half goal or like the first goal would be like GitLab.com, right? So
yeah. The other thing is integrating a Golang process into Omnibus is significantly easier than integrating another Puma server.
would you know why that is so? Like, why would it be easier?
Because deploying a Go binary is significantly easier, and all the configuration options are kind of just gone. Like the kind of tuning stuff and it's also like running a second Puma. I don't know how that's going to interact with the existing Rails code. So you're basically you're having to reuse parts of the same code, and I don't know exactly how that would work. And like it's just to me it feels like a scarier integration than just running a separate Go binary.
Yeah, but it's not only a Go binary though. We still have the gRPC
right.
server, which is basically
but if
Rails
the gRPC server is built into the regular Puma process, then there's one less thing to deploy. There's less to deploy, unless and you're actually doing proper WebSocket to gRPC to the actual core code, and that feels like a better like application layout to me. So and the same thing on GitLab.com. It's having traffic come in, going to a gRPC or going to a WebSocket service that makes calls to the regular API through gRPC, to me makes more sense. Or a separate a separate pool of API servers, because the API servers and the web servers and the Git servers, they're the same program, just running with different traffic routing. So they're not really configured differently. They just are, you know, they're just a clone of the existing service.
Yeah, my only concern with the going straight to any cable is the, you know, we increase like complexity of the initial setup. Like even if we go Kubernetes, we still need the, you know, separate fleet of gRPC nodes and separate fleet of the WebSocket server, although it's a bit simpler because it's just a Go binary. And
yeah.
Well,
that's what I'm saying is I don't think we would actually need a separate gRPC server cluster. We can just reuse the existing API server and add the gRPC endpoint to it. And that would simplify the omnibus installation as well. I think it's worth considering and like looking at how you would serve gRPC from an existing Puma process.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's possible, but yeah, I think it's on a separate process that, you know, but anyway, just a question, like, why do you think it's more comfortable to add like gRPC add-on to our existing API nodes versus like adding on another Puma server, and it's like kind of the same thing, I guess?
It's a lower, it's a better, there's been a couple of times we've talked about switching from switching requests to the API to gRPC anyway, so that because it's much more efficient than JSON API requests, so that when Gitly needs to talk to the API, it can use gRPC instead of JSON requests, and that would be much more efficient that way. So we kind of want it anyway. I just don't know if that idea ever actually got turned into a real issue. From a service perspective, it's gRPC, but it's the same set of API calls. If I'm understanding how this is going to work, so it needs the same data that's available via JSON. It's just any cable only implements gRPC to get the data.
It's not really data that's available in JSON, but it's like the gRPC server boots up like a Rails install, so that it has access to all like Rails models or anything. And
right.
gRPC would basically, the gRPC call from the Go AnyCable server to the gRPC server, AnyCable gRPC server, would be something like somebody subscribed to this channel, and that would trigger a code and run the channel class and find the right action and do authorization and all that. So, and then the response goes to the WebSocket server, and the WebSocket server can decide if it's gonna accept the connection or not. So yeah, basically the Rails stuff goes to the gRPC server.
Sure. Man, I wish that I had the idea for a project to start being able to implement Rails models in Go, so that we could just do the whole thing in Go and just give a Golang process access to the database. But I don't know if that was just kind of a random idea. Anyway, I guess either way works. I just feel like we're gonna have to get to the Anycable stuff sooner rather than later. Just because I have my doubts that the action cable in Rails is going to like scale very well at all.
Yeah, I was just trying to look
I
at
kind
what
of
we
feel
talked
the
about.
opposite. Like I
Yeah.
feel like we might not need to, but yeah, it's really hard to tell right now. I mean, it's basically
Yeah.
gut feel and everything, right?
Yeah, we need to get some production testing. No, I think the separate Puma is fine. It's just going to be a little. It's just going to be a little. I think it's going to be a little more work to integrate into the omnibus, just because the omnibus is a tangled mess of code.
But like it would get us from where we are now, which is having a feature built with action cable and sort of feature flagged already and ready to ship, but without the infrastructure support, to actually having something we can see, even if it's only on a small project somewhere, and we can measure the impact.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was late. Just a question on the omnibus thing. So I've lately been working on like adding support for something unrelated to our Helm charts, which is it's basically a completely different development flow, like a completely different we have to support things in both our Helm charts and omnibus, but like we don't get that automatically. We just have to do the work in both places. So I think if we're trying something out, we can pick whichever makes most sense. So if we're thinking this is going to be in Kubernetes, we'd probably start with the Helm chart and the images that uses. If we're thinking omnibus, which I don't think we are, then we'd start there. Does that help at all? Like I said, sorry, I missed a bunch of the start of this call.
Yeah, no, that's actually really helpful, and yeah, I think starting with the cloud native Helm chart, if that's what you're talking about, is to me the better idea, because like long term we want to be able to run this in Kubernetes. Actually, even short term, I think it would be better.
We could also
just to recap. I mean, the dilemma we were facing was like, because the delivery team was kind of blocked on the project expert queue to Kubernetes. So it's like, it's either we select working on the charts, but then get blocked on the Kubernetes deployment stuff, or unless we take that work.
No, I don't think we should not be blocking on that team at all. The fact that we have anything blocked on that team is a huge problem right now, and I am trying to encourage more people to do the Kubernetes work themselves, and just use the delivery team as a code reviewer, as a maintainer. That way we stop blocking on that team, because right now that team is too small, and they are just a bottleneck on everything we're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically the two main options are like work on Omnibus, and then we could run this on our API or web nodes, the extra Puma server, right? And the other option would be like work on the charts and then run it on Kubernetes. Although the Kubernetes option means we can't deploy this to self-hosted until we do the omnibus thing.
Yeah, I think we should do the Kubernetes work first.
What's different about the Sidekick use in Kubernetes versus this? I mean, they need access to Redis PubSub as well. They need access to the database. Surely the Helm charts would be very similar. The Kubernetes deployment files would be very similar. Config files, like we would have a basis to start from, right?
Yeah, you should. That should definitely be a basis to start from. Sean, do you know anything about the Sidekick stuff?
I am literally working on the Sidekick Helm chart at the moment. So in theory, yes, but yeah, I think that's right. I think we would probably want a separate image for this, but we could reuse a lot of like how the existing Sidekick or Puma charts, depending.
Oops.
obviously the Puma one is that it's meant to be accepting requests from somewhere, whereas Sidekick
Ron,
one
you
is
crashed.
accepting requests from. Sorry.
It froze.
Basically, yes. It's what everybody said sounds reasonable to me, having been working on the Sidekick chart lately, Sidekick image and Sidekick chart, I should say.
Yeah, I tried to annotate some of that in the agenda, and by the way, that conversation and got lost. So if you wouldn't mind adding the gist, I'd appreciate it. But so that brings me on to the next point then, like what can we take out of that task list if we did want to go Kubernetes first and to help out with this? Like there are a few things that like I'm not exactly clear on, like for example, Dockerization or containerization of the existing application. Anytime we've done this in the past with Kubernetes, we've had different Docker containers for every service that we wanted to run. So we'd presumably need to containerize the action cable and feature work on its own as a service, and then use Kubernetes to manage that. Is that right?
Yes, we have a set of images that we use. So I'll just share the link to the repo for those. There you go. So you can see from the images in there, like, first of all, how we typically build an image, like what's in common between them, what's different, but also like, you mentioned logging to standard out, like that's, already how it's working in these ones. So yeah, that would be the best place to start there.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, there's things like that, like log into standard out and other things that we've, like maybe the delivery team have decided as they've gone through bringing the project export queue into Kubernetes that, I don't know, maybe they're documented here or we could document them as well as we go. The other things were like, there are things on that task list that we absolutely can start to take off. Like if we're going to make a decision about whether to use Redis, the existing Redis pub sub nodes, or provision new ones, we can do that. And then I mean, if Ben was saying about like each individual team, containerizing and writing the deployments for their own work, well, like I don't see why we can't start to pick things off this queue and have it a certain state. Marin's estimate was 2 weeks that they would have the project export stuff cleaned up, let's say 4. So we could have it in a decent state by that point where there wouldn't be too much work to do.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the charts is like once you've got set up, which admittedly took me a while because I had the wrong permissions in GCP, it's really easy to like spin things up. Like that's the whole point of them, right? Like it's really easy to spin things up, scale up, like try it out, try something else, change a config setting and just like have that automatically applied. Like that's all the sort of the selling points of this. So yes. The Redis nodes thing, I think, is a bit tricky because of our mixed deployment model. Because like the Redis nodes currently use Omnibus, and in future we don't want them to use Omnibus. But like there might be a sort of issue there if we want to add new ones. So it might be easiest to start with the existing ones, and then once we've got a bit further along, talk to people if we need separate ones or not. If we can defer that decision, basically, I'm saying we should, because if we have to use a different Redis node, that's the same amount of work now as it would be in 2 weeks, pretty much, right, Heinrich? It's just that if we don't have to do it, then we should probably avoid it.
Yeah, on the dev side, it's just like which Redis node to connect to, right? So no change.
And like all the things that would normally hold up the first Kubernetes deployment will probably have been figured out, right, Sean? Like, I mean, like service discovery, that's the thing that has held up in the past that I've seen hold up projects is, but that would have been established, right? Because we don't require any more services than the Sidekick work requires.
I actually don't know the answer to that. Maybe Ben does, because the difference is we need to actually route some traffic to these nodes as well, which we don't really do for Sidekick nodes.
Yeah, I don't have a. Yeah, I don't have a note. I don't have a quick answer for traffic.
Okay, cool, thanks. So just sorry to jump back a bit, but just on the first thing we spoke about, is there any value in doing that, like deploying a feature behind a feature flag on a very, very small project, or we decided that that's not worth doing?
I definitely think that's worth doing.
Okay, cool. Well, it looks like that could be a first step then, because that would give us some information about Action Cable and how performant it is.
Yeah, we're gonna add a feature flag anyway, so like no extra work. But I think that you're at the start of the call, you mentioned like trying a feature flag small project on the existing nodes, right? But we can't do that right now if we're going Kubernetes, because yeah. But since we're doing the Kubernetes, we could still do like the start with a small project thing.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
why couldn't we do that?
Because we need the omnibus work if you wanted to run the Puma thing. Because
Oh, sorry, you're talking about the Puma thing.
Yeah, John was suggesting at the start that we can skip the Kubernetes thing if we did the omnibus thing and just run it on the same API nodes with a very small project to lessen the risk. But
cool. Okay. Cheers. Okay, thanks for the discussion. Yeah, the working group page is up, so you can have a look. We should establish exit criteria, but since we have a business goal for the group, but since we don't know which way we're going to go with this first, it's hard to establish exit criteria. So I'll open an MR for this to get the outcomes of this discussion into the working group page.
I don't really know how working groups work, but I'd suggest our first milestone point is to have some kind of way of testing this out, at least in staging. Like we're testing out the Sidekick Kubernetes stuff now. As soon as we can get to that point, I'll feel like we're definitely getting close for sure. So I'd suggest that's probably our first waypoint milestone. Not really a milestone, whatever it is.
yeah, and it's kind of like decided, or like discussions were leaning towards working on the charts in Kubernetes, right? So maybe we just decide on that, or so we don't leave it hanging which way we go. Or
yeah, I mean, Heinrich, I can talk to you separately maybe tomorrow, because I know it's sort of getting late for you, and also I've got childcare all day today, apart from nap time, which is now, so I've got limited time today. I can talk to you tomorrow about what I've been doing there. It's actually quite nice as a development environment. There are a few quirks, but you can because you've already done some work in Omnibus, right? So you can then make a decision about, well, is this about the same amount of work, or is it going to be much quicker to do one or the other? And then you can sort of feed that back into the channel. Maybe we don't need to necessarily talk about it in the call.
All right, cool. We're up against time, so thanks everyone for coming. Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss before we go? I'll take that as a no. All right, thanks very much.